pipelines of talent and as many people represented in the workforce as possible. We're super excited today. This is our very first huddle that we've done after writing some thought leadership around maintaining culture not only in a virtual space, but during times of incredible disruption that we've all been experiencing. So we're incredibly fortunate, and I'm very, very excited to have Rachel Friedman, founder and CEO of TENFOLD, in the conversation around culture and just what's going on right now and how we can all be more mindful of what we're doing in our own workspaces and how our employees are feeling. So Rachel, do you want to introduce yourself and share about TENFOLD?
Sure. Thank you, Kelly, and thanks for the invitation. This should be fun, and hopefully we'll engage in some good discussion here. So at TENFOLD, we're really focused on, the way we like to describe it, as helping our clients reveal and reflect the magic of brand and culture. So we've also always had a really strong focus on culture, as well as the physical environment, how we bring those stories to life in the workplace. So we have some unique points of view and perspective as it relates to how we're all dealing with some of the changes in our everyday, and this sort of very unexpected shift to 100%, for many people, 100% work from home environment or employee experience. And so our culture practice has always really been focused around defining and articulating company culture and helping people to activate it or to manage it or to transform it. And so the culture practice is really very well suited to helping our clients today think about how they can build and preserve company culture in this virtual environment. And then of course we have the perspective of, well, how is this going to change as we start to think about the physical workplace? And in particular, how do we start to plan for maybe not necessarily so much the now, but the post-pandemic world.
Rachel, around that topic, I've been reading a few things in the last few days about what businesses and different people are thinking about what might be coming in post-pandemic world. What are you hearing, or has there been any conversation in your space around that?
Yeah, so I think that we certainly have seen some bold moves, and I'll kind of quote Kurt Walker from Nationwide, who is published in an article is talking about how potentially 30 to 50% of their workforce is going to work from home 100% permanently. So that's a pretty bold and kind of extreme, I guess, example that I've seen publicly, at least over the last several weeks. But what I really think is going to end up happening is that people are going to engage in what we're calling the flexible workplace. So to us, what that means is that individuals within a company, as well as maybe different groups within a company, will have one foot in the virtual workplace and one foot in the physical workplace coming out of this. And that the workplace will be a much more fluid environment that shifts between those two environments. And that the goal, I think, for companies is to really find ways to benefit from the best of both of those worlds, because they both have trade-offs. And so what we're really encouraging our clients to do is think really thoughtfully about post-pandemic, because it actually will be different than how people are thinking about the physical work environment right now. Thinking about it post-pandemic, it's a little counterintuitive, but what we expect is that people will still very much want to embrace the physical workplace, and it will be the opposite of what we're trying to do with people right now in the physical environment. So right now, companies are really focused on, how do I keep people apart? How do we maintain this 6-foot distancing in this day-to-day work environment? How do we reduce the number of people in conferencing spaces and meeting spaces? Whereas in the post-pandemic era, coming into the physical environment is going to be the opposite of all that. It's going to be, how do we drive more social interaction? How do we drive more connection and engagement? If you want to be isolated because you have heads down work in the new world, you're going to work at home that day. So what we really think is that it's going to turn into more of this, the way I've been describing it is kind of like dress for your day. So, when companies sort of went from their business attire to giving people much more freedom, choice, and flexibility and saying, look, we trust you as grown-ups and professionals that you're going to dress appropriately for the kind of day that you have. And I think it's going to be very much the same as it relates to workplace. I think the message is going to be work in the place today, this hour, this week, that fits the kind of work that you need to do best. And so again, as a result, I think at the end of the day, what we're going to have is this really flexible, fluid workplace.
So it sounds like too that when workers do come back to a shared space, that it'll be very intentional around what's happening at that time, whether it's collective, collaborative work or socialization in a way to build team. I mean, it sounds like there's going to be some real definitive lines around those two, work from home or I'm working collectively.
Yeah, I think it will evolve and it'll be different for everyone. But I think that actually what it does is maybe puts a little bit more responsibility on the individual employee to really make good decisions about what's best for not just their role and the work that they're contributing to the company, but for their own career development and their own career progression. And so, yes, I do think that from a physical design perspective, we expect some changes to accommodate, again, sort of really driving this social engagement and interaction. And what it probably means is reallocating some of the space that had been dedicated to individual heads down workspace to reclaim that space and repurpose it for more of these socially connected and interactive engagements that are going to go on in the workplace.
That makes a lot of sense. We're doing some deep dive conversation at the chamber as well, and it'll be coming up in some future thought leadership on multi-generational workforce. And I think right now we have 5 peer groups in the workforce. I think the silent generation, baby boomers, Gen X, millennial, and the emerging Gen Z. So are you seeing from businesses or different folks that you talk to about how are these different generations responding to, just everything, the change in the space and the work from home, and what are you seeing?
Yeah, again, I think I maybe expected that the Gen Z would be all about this shift to work from home. And I have been very surprised to hear that some of the things that, even the older generations maybe are struggling with in this environment are ringing true for the younger employees as well. And so it relates to wanting that human connection and interaction, maybe feeling stunted in their career growth because of obstacles around learning from others, mentoring and coaching, the fact that we're social creatures and we crave that interaction. I've heard some challenges around focus and motivation. And, what's been surprising for me in that as well is that oftentimes what I'm hearing around challenges in focus even relates to people who don't even have any distractions at home. So speaking, with our experience at Tenfold, I mean, we have parents who are trying to juggle full-time childcare and working their job. And of course they have tremendous amount of distraction and challenges with focusing. But I'm also hearing that from, our millennials who don't have children and maybe don't even have a roommate, a partner, or a spouse. And so I think that trying to gain our footing in what feels right is pretty universal across the generations. And then I've also had some unique experiences over the last several weeks to connect with a lot of leaders in Columbus, and leaders who are either leaning into retirement or have retired. And consistently, one of the things that they have said to me, and in many ways unprompted, has been, I just don't know how leaders are going to maintain their culture in this environment. And I happen to agree with them. That is something that keeps me up at night, just in terms of my own firm and knowing what I think makes us really special. And I think that that's what we think is at the heart of every great company or organization is a terrific company culture. And so I think that's really where the big challenge is with a lot of these changes.
Yeah. Would you, do you think that most companies or organizations, because like I said, we have private and public sector on this call, do you think that most people truly understand they can articulate their culture, whether they're in a leadership role or an individual contributor role? How soon in the I started the job process does someone typically get a good, kind of feel for what is the culture in this place?
I think people have a feeling for what it is. I would say across the board, many people, including leaders of organizations and businesses, have trouble actually articulating it. And that's actually why we created a whole practice at Tenfold that's focused on that, because we saw that as a major need. And I think the reason why is because in many respects, these are the intangibles. These are the intangibles of businesses and organizations, and they're squishy in that way. And so it's also kind of a little bit more deeply rooted in how you feel. I've heard there's many definitions of culture, and one is how we are together. One is the corporate soul or the soul of the organization. So these are they're really feelings based, and oftentimes it's sort of hard to put your finger on it. So I do think it's a challenge to articulate. When we ask people to articulate the culture, the closest thing we usually get is sort of a listing or a description of their values, which is certainly a good place to start. Our perspective at Tenfold is that those are foundational and very important, but they aren't necessarily the most unique and differentiated. So for example, the way we think about them oftentimes is that they're sort of like the footers of a home. Everybody needs them. It's a sort of standard spec. So my foundation isn't necessarily going to look that much different than your home down the street. What we think culture is really, well, what does the house really look like? What is the texture? How does it feel? What's the style? So that's the analogy. And so what we try to get to with our clients is a much more emotionally connected articulation of what really is the DNA of the organization, what makes it, what is that secret sauce that everyone knows that they have, but has trouble telling you what the recipe is.
Yeah, and that is such a unique approach, because I think about, my many years in the corporate world, and, going to a place or coming from a place of, we don't even express our feelings in the workplace, right? That's like something that's compartmentalized and left out in the car or someplace, and then I show up at work and I'm a different person. So it sounds like what you're talking about too is really embracing that it is about feelings, it is about emotional connection, and really plumbing that.
Absolutely. And I think it's even more central to what we believe in terms of a philosophy. And that is that we think that the greatest brands are built from the inside out. And so what makes your value proposition unique from a brand perspective is actually really something that's really special and unique about your company culture. Because we believe that that's really ownable. It is a source of competitive advantage. It's hard to replicate. It's valuable. And so what we try to do is really find what those nuggets are and understand them so that companies can actually protect and reinforce what makes them great, but can also embark on a journey of transformation if they feel like that's where they need to go with their culture. So it really is very central and core to what we believe leads to great performance, whether you're a nonprofit, and an organization, or a business.
Yeah. I'm going to open up, I think, a little bit here to the group that's on, because we'd love to have you participate in the conversation as well. Any questions or comments? And I'm going to maybe prod a little bit here with one I'm going to throw out to our educators on the call, whether higher ed or secondary or in the career tech space. The way things are changing and the disruption that we've all had, is this changing the way that we prepare young workers to come into the workplace? Are you seeing a need for different communication, different education, different things in your curriculum. I'm just really curious as to how all of this disruption is changing how you deliver education.
Well, Kelly, I don't think that we really know yet, because the way that we were thrown into it in March was just kind of a, it was a crisis mode. We had to move quick without really thinking it through. We didn't have any planning time.
Right.
So I'm not sure that we really have wrapped our arms around what this is all gonna bring about moving forward. Now that we've had some planning time and what the beginning of the 2020-2021 school year looks like, it's still, there's still an opportunity for that to be different. We just don't know. We haven't had enough direct contact with students,
Right.
to really kind of put a mark on that and say, oh, okay, well, let's do this or let's do that, because everything has been reduction. And in our adult work classes, and Lisa Duckworth can speak more to this, we've had to take classes that were maybe full at 20 and bring them down to 10. We've had to change end dates because of this. So much has changed. I don't think we've had an opportunity yet to really think through that communication piece, or even that the bigger picture, the curriculum piece on what that might look like, and is that going to be useful in the workforce.
Yeah, thank you for that, Christine. Rachel, for your purposes, Christine Belcher is with Eastland Fairfield Career and Technical Schools. And you bring up a really interesting question, in the sense that, or a perspective, that when we are thrown into such chaos with little or no warning, that certainly does shake up the culture. Even if it was a very firm foundation and very well articulated, it seems like even those that have the best setup, it's still a recognition of how incredibly disruptive and scary it can be for everyone.
From the Columbus State side, I mean, I really can't speak for the whole school, but I can speak from the industry related side. We've had to adjust really quickly. Those of us that teach hands-on stuff, not me, but those of us that teach hands-on skills, how do you put that into a virtual environment? And if you can, or if you can't, then how do we teach that stuff? The other thing that it's really done is those things that we teach in person, how do we now convey them in an online environment? And as a specific example, my interns at the end of their internship would come in and do a PowerPoint presentation, and then we would, talk to them about their presentation, then also about their presentation skills. Well, that we can't do that right now. So I've shifted to them doing online presentations, because if they're not doing what we're doing right now, they're going to have to. And there's a proper way to communicate and to present yourself in a virtual environment. So we're definitely trying to teach some new skills to those that need them.
Yeah, thank you for that. Rachel, there's also, from the folks that are onboarding and hiring new people to their companies, and also to those in the service organizations that are preparing those job seekers, how do you convey and breathe life into your culture when to people who are coming into the organization brand new, or you're trying to recruit them and you're trying to share what a great organization you have and what your culture is like when it's limited to just virtual spaces?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it does start with what we were talking about earlier, which is if you can't name it and you can't describe it and you can't articulate it, how do you manage it? So it starts with some examination around what is truly unique, special, and differentiated. And then I think it really focuses on how you take that message and you tailor it to how you would describe your employer brand. So think of it, as it relates to recruiting and onboarding, it's really about giving people a window into the everyday of what it's like to be working, like in our example, working at Tenfold. I think that what we're also recommending is that we, as companies, do an audit of all of the different digital channels that we are communicating through and connecting with as those touch points with our employees. And so that really includes all of your digital touch points that are internal, like Teams, for example, if you're using Teams, and how you're communicating within that environment. Obviously Zoom, where you're having meetings, or if you're meeting in Teams, intranet, what are you sending through email? What types of communications are going through that channel? And then also I'm encouraging clients as well to consider the social channels, because the reality is that we are all sort of working across probably 12 different digital touch points throughout the day, multiple times. And I can connect as a leader with my employees through our internal channels just as much as I'm connecting with them on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn and others, Snapchat, whatever. And so what it really is requiring of leaders, particularly in this environment, is to really have an intentional and strategic plan around your communications through these digital touch points, meeting them where they are, essentially. And then also obviously factoring in the fact that you will have live interactions through this type of a platform. And, again, being very planful in knowing what is it that I want to communicate. If I have one shot, which is kind of the position that we're in today, I may have one shot to connect with someone on my team per day or maybe per week. So I need to make the most of that. I need to be very planned and prepared to know what's the message, what's really important, what do I want to get across. And then what we're also recommending to our clients, and as a service that we're providing, is how you can take steps to convey all of those messages in a really creative way, and doing that through very creative digital. So whether that's imagery, copy, animation, sound, more detailed blog posts, things that go a little bit deeper, and really looking at all of that content and how you want to provision that across those digital channels and when. So you almost think of it as a culture campaign.
Yeah.
It, again, is just taking another level of being strategic, because a lot of us can kind of wing it on a daily basis, when we're bumping into this person and that person and this person, and you can kind of touch everyone and check in with them or say great job, or but now all of those interactions have to be planned. And so as a result, you really have to think through, how am I addressing communicating around our strategic objectives? How am I communicating around our performance? How am I communicating employee recognition? How are we celebrating things? So there's a lot more work that needs to be done to plan and prepare for those. So that's how I would address sort of the digital touch points in terms of preserving and building the culture. And then I also think something that's really important exercise for everyone to go through, which we've done at Tenfold and we do with our clients as well, is a big part of culture are the rituals that we engage in, both the prescribed rituals as well as the organic rituals that just sort of happen. So I'll give you some examples. A prescribed ritual for us at Tenfold is that we, every Monday morning, have status meeting. A prescribed ritual is that we have a company retreat that we do once a year. Somewhat of a prescribed ritual is that we celebrate anniversaries by bringing in the favorite lunch of the person who's celebrating, and we all gather together and we share in that celebration. We can't do those things right now, but those are really important to our culture, and there's many, many, many more. Some of the unprescribed ones would be every day somebody, and we don't even really know exactly who it is, but we'll write a little message on a mini whiteboard on our coffee maker. And it's very punny usually. And it's something that we all, it's an organic ritual that happens at Tenfold, and it's really fun for us. So what we've done and what we encourage our clients to do is brainstorm all of those rituals, get them down on paper. They're really important to you. Make sure that you know what they are. And then once you know what they are, you can start to look at them and say, all right, how might we adapt to this in the virtual workplace? You know, knowing what the environment that we're in right now. So for example, with the anniversaries, instead of us gathering together with the favorite food, we're having their favorite lunch delivered to their house. Or sometimes we're sending donuts that arrive at like 7 in the morning before and we've obviously adapted our Monday morning status meeting. We've also implemented an everyday stand-up virtual meeting every morning at 9 a.m. And I think that, you know, for us, that was really important, just to know that there would at least be one touch point every day that we could all see each other's faces. And that was sort of guaranteed, and we could sort of go around the horn and sort of share out our intentions for the day and kind of what we're working on. It has kept us connected and has kept us at least seeing each other's face. So someone gets a haircut, I can still say, hey, you know, you got your haircut. Those things matter. The banter that goes on at the beginning of those calls is really important. And I would say, you know, that would be another recommendation, is to let those meetings breathe a little bit, let people engage in some of that casual water cooler conversation that you don't have anymore.
That's really important. I'm thinking about the rituals that we have at the chamber, and I think the last time you and I talked, we talked about the board that sits behind Tracy, who's our receptionist, that has the number of members we have, and that's pulsed every day, and that's something that Rachel's team at TENFOLD provided during the design and reconception of our spaces. And so that's one. And then the one that was kind of not really a planned one, but a fun one, is there's just, who knows why, who knows the genesis, there's a rubber chicken that just makes its way from people's desk to desk.
Yes.
And that's silly.
Yeah, ours is like, this is like a really crazy story, but when we moved into our original studio downtown on Rich Street, for some unknown reason, there was this little teeny My Little Pony that sat on the windowsill outside of our studio, and every day we'd walk by and it just sat there, and eventually someone just picked it up and took it inside. And same sort of thing, it became this thing, it would just kind of float around. And you know, if I was going and I was traveling for a few days, I would hide it in a place that someone would find it, you know, a day or two after I left. And so yeah, those are the things that, you know, just like your family, you have rituals in your family, and those are important for making it fun and keeping you together. And so it's important to capture those and categorize them. And we also talk with clients, you know, irrespective of what we're going through with COVID, sometimes there are rituals that that can't work when you get bigger, as an example. And so what we do with our clients is really help them figure out what are those things that have to break. It's much better for you to break them in advance and know how you're going to maybe address that or replace it, than to have them break because somebody joined the company and that one extra person made it too unwieldy. First of all, you don't want to be that one person that broke the ritual. And secondly, it really, you know, it leads to some opportunities to create new rituals and really just grow with the business and get out in front of that.
A really interesting point too. If it is a growing organization and we're bringing new people in, to kind of keep it kind of always growing in a living organism, so it's not kind of stuck in, you know, we've done this for, you know, 40 years because we've just always done this before.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And like your example, Kelly, when you're talking about adding getting the next member, and that's become a celebratory ritual of putting that number up on the wall, you know, you can have created, and these are some of the things we're doing for clients, a really cool animation that is that exact replication of that celebratory moment. Announce that on a group call in the morning, post it to Teams, you know, the animation comes to life, and it's a way for all of you to really celebrate that.
Thanks
Those
for that
are
idea.
the examples that we're talking about when we talk about having a really planful and strategic digital communications campaign.
That's really awesome. Thanks for that idea, by the way. I'm going to take that back to our marketing folks. I think Hope is on the call. So I'm kind of wondering too, Rachel, and for anybody really on the call, what are we learning about ourselves and our coworkers, and just in general, some ahas or some just moments during all of this where, I mean, I can think of some things for me where things are just, for example, I think of myself as pretty much an introvert. Those who know me might disagree, but I realized during all of this, I need the energy of a large group of people a lot more than I was appreciating before that. So that would be an example for me. Don't know if anyone else has had any kind of during all of this, regarding culture, the way that we show up at work and in the workplace.
One of the things that just came to my mind as Rachel was talking, I'm retired military and have deployed a couple times. And some of the things, Rachel, that you're talking about are what we would do in a deployed environment to maintain morale. And because it's the exact opposite environment, but it's still kind of similar. We were all stuck in a particular place. We couldn't interact with anybody else. It was Groundhog Day, same thing over and over and over again, without much distraction, no travel. So the daily stand-up was something that we always did, and having little things and letting meetings be a little bit more loose sometimes, and letting people be a little more free when they did get a chance to relax. Very similar. And one of the things I'm noticing now too is who communicates and who does not. It's when you're in an office environment, it's easy to get information. You can go into somebody's office and people are kind of forced to communicate. But now that we're virtual, I'm noticing that there are some team members that just don't communicate at all.
I think you would find those in the education world probably had in the K through 12 space. Jeremy probably had a lot of that same experience from a student perspective as opposed to a coworker perspective. For those that are in smaller companies, Rachel, smaller organizations, are there special considerations or challenges that the smaller companies face that a larger business, when it comes to culture and how to articulate it and make it come alive and have everyone participate and understand to the best of their ability?
I actually think it tends to be easier in the smaller companies. The bigger ones that we work with, there can be microcultures. Sometimes those are healthy. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're a result of mergers and acquisitions where those cultures sort of die hard in some ways and they're not really acknowledged. And so sometimes those historical relationships, affiliations, you see this a lot in banks. Oh, well, they are the bank one guys, or they are the First Mary guys and gals, or and that's sort of how they're identified within the broader organization. So I actually think it's easier when they're smaller. I also think as a leader, it's when you have less numbers, it's easier to reach out to everybody one-on-one, which is something I would also recommend during this time. Especially, Jeremy, to your point with, if there are people that are getting quiet on you, who aren't communicating, I would definitely try to reach out and see how they're doing. And one of the things that we also talk about is just, not necessarily saying to them, so how are you doing? Because oftentimes you're going to get the expected answer. We're saying, yeah, fine, good, okay, instead really asking them to tell you some stories. So, tell me about your best day during this time. Tell me about your worst day. And really start to listen to what the answers are and really sort of look for the real meaning in their answers, because it isn't, I think, a really important time to get people really talking. It's been interesting. It is not a one size fits all. And like I said earlier, I think it's easy to make assumptions about how certain people are doing for certain reasons. And then, it's like you're completely surprised by what's driving some of the behavior, where some of the anxieties come from for some people. things I would never even have known, nor would people tell me until I, really sort of start to ask questions and really listen to the responses.
You know what I was thinking? For people that are, I hate to say this, but accustomed to working in toxic cultures where they're being micromanaged and now they're working from home, this might have somehow been a relief for them. I mean, because I would think it would be harder to micromanage. And I know that sounds odd, but I was just sitting here thinking about the people that are unfortunate and are in those environments, and now they're working from home. It might actually be healthier for them.
That's an interesting point, because what we're saying is that there is becoming a little bit more distance, literally and figuratively,
Yes.
between management or leadership and the employee. And so you're right. It could be that it's perhaps a better work experience in that way. But I think, certainly that feeling of disconnection, or feeling that they understand how their work connects to the bigger picture, those are things that could suffer as well. But you're right, ideally we all want to have great culture, right?
I just wanted to chime in for a second. I'm Malka with Jewish Family Services. Hi.
Hi.
I feel so privileged to be with this group. Thank you so much, Kelly. I think what's also interesting, I work with job seekers that nonstop. I love them more than anything. I think though for a lot of them, they miss their work family. So, really coming into work, and I know we've sort of touched upon this, but it's like trying to recreate this work family. Okay, that's one challenge. Second of all, if really you're single and there's nobody else. So there's this, they were the people that helped your day get through, and now you're feeling, how do I really manage isolation?
Yeah.
Right? How do I really manage that? I mean, we do a lot of Zoom calls so people don't feel isolated. We just do as much as we can. So here, come in, be with me, right? But I think that those are the kinds of things that people are trying to figure out, because if for some people it was such a shock when that they can't walk in the door to their work family.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do about that? And like Jeremy said, maybe some of those people aren't communicating because they're like still trying to rebuild this family or understand it. And they're not sure of the tools. What should I be doing? What's okay? What's appropriate? What's the etiquette? So I just wanted to share that and get any thoughts that you had. And like I said, thank you, Kelly. You're awesome for putting this together.
Well, I think what you've touched on is yes, this sense of isolation. And I think we all are mourning a loss of that in so many ways. I mean, I had a milestone birthday in April. My daughter's supposed to be graduating from high school. There's a lot during this time as individuals and as employees that we're yearning for and that we're mourning. We have one employee who's pregnant, due at the end of July, and very emotional time for her. This was not how she imagined her pregnancy to be. She's so grateful to be pregnant. She had a lot of trouble getting pregnant. So this was a really big deal, and, hasn't been able to celebrate and hasn't been able to be with her parents. And so I think everyone's really sort of struggling with that. What I will say is that a couple things we've done, because I don't think anything is going to really solve for that to the degree that people need it. But we have set aside specific time for what we're calling just culture check-ins. And it really is just, we've done them 2 hours in length. We've had 2 since the shutdown. And it's really just time specifically set aside. Sometimes we'll have a little bit of an agenda, but sometimes it's really just, how are we doing together? How are we together? How is everyone doing? I did go through an exercise in the first one where we had everyone sort of give a few minutes on how they're doing personally and how they're doing professionally. And it was really insightful to sort of hear how everyone is doing in both of those sides of their world. Some people got very emotional. It was enlightening to hear. And then I think the end result is that we all felt a lot closer, you know, after the 2 hours were up. We felt connected. And it was time, again, giving those conversations room to breathe. There was no other, like, we weren't talking about project work or anything business related, but it was really an opportunity for us to connect as human beings. So I would encourage those types of activities. And then for Stacy, what we ended up doing is we did have a socially distanced shower for her. And it was very socially distanced. So it was outside, we were 6 feet apart, we were masked. But we had we had 15 different members of her family, her parents, her husband's parents, aunts and uncles and friends that all created small videos just on their phone, sent them to our team. We edited them together, and it was awesome. And it just, again, it's not going to make it what it was for her, but we gave her that gift, and it was amazing to see. So I think getting creative on what can you do in terms of a real live in-person event. You know, this is the world we live in now, and we're just going to have to kind of get used to wearing masks and doing things differently, and it's just going to become part of our life for a while.
That's really interesting, and thank you for bringing up that topic too. The collective grief, I think, that we're feeling as a community of people, as employers and employees. It's something that's showing up a lot when I have consultations with members at the chamber, when we talk about what are the biggest concerns. Culture was one, and mental health and wellness in the workplace has kind of shot to the top as well. No surprise, I think, to anyone. So I think these conversations are really important, you know, to get them, you know, out on the table. And I love what you're saying, Rachel, in the space of the meetings, giving time and that breathing room to really share and to ask some really open-ended questions that can't be answered by "I'm fine, we're good, move on to the next person," but really trying to dig into personally and professionally how people are feeling. We can't discount that. That's just too important and too much top of mind for everyone right now.
I've also mailed some cards and letters to people, you know, on the team. And I think, you know, it's kind of weird because it's like, well, they live, you know, a mile away or 5 miles away or whatever. But, you know, if I can't see them, and I might have, you know, given them a card if they were here in the studio. So why shouldn't I, you know, write them a card and send it in the mail? So that's a nice surprise for people. We've also sent, we had a little bit of an internal campaign after that first culture check-in. I really wanted to do something nice for the team. And we have one member of our team who her job is to really take care of our team in the studio. So now that we're not in the studio, I mean, she was really struggling with feeling valued. And of course she is a valued member of our team. So we did, I gave her a very modest budget, and we put together little gift baskets personalized for each person. And we delivered 3 a week. So we just hit 3 employees, and it was so fun because then when we would go to our morning stand-up, they could sort of talk about what they got. So people who were really struggling keeping their kids busy, we had like kids crafts and markers, and then we might have had stuff for that employee that, you know, some self-care items, really encouraging them to take time for themselves. And so getting creative with those things, they don't have to cost a lot of money, but it's really like the thought that matters. And we prioritized who got their baskets first by kind of how we felt our folks were doing overall. And we hit our most vulnerable ones first.
That makes sense.
Rachel, can you give an example of some of the questions or a question you could use to get the conversation started? Because I love that idea, and I think I would like to do that with my team, but I have a feeling like, okay, we're going to talk about personal and professional, and then you're going to get a lot of radio silence. or I will go to therapy and spill my guts and then still radio silence. So just what question, at least one that you know that just really got people talking?
Well, I think talking about giving them some time in advance, first of all. I think let them know what you are going to ask in advance so that they can prepare their thoughts. And depending on their personalities, sometimes we have people who literally have written things down, and we have others who just come and speak. So I would get it to them in advance. I do think one is, tell me about your worst day and tell me about your best day. I think that's a really good one because people can start to think back on the last 4 months. Tell me something that you're grateful for during this time. Tell me something that you've learned about yourself during this time. We did an exercise at a retreat a while ago where we looked at the whole year, and you could do this over the last 4 or 5 months pretty easily, and have them map their what we call seminal moments. So your highest highs and your lowest lows. And what we would say to them is, you don't have to share, you get to decide what you share from that map, but because we want them to go in to be just really honest with themselves and really map out their highest highs and their lowest lows. And what happens in that exercise is that they learn something about themselves during this period of time. And oftentimes I think what we learn is that the lows, as terrible as they feel in that moment, they generally spike back up to some sort of high that happened. So it just gives people some unique perspective. And then what we ask them to do is just share a couple. And then also share what did you take away from that whole exercise. So that's a really cool one that you can do based on a year. I've in some of my peer advisory groups, we've done them for your life. You talk about some crazy learnings there. And it's fun to do more than once too, because as you get some time on things, certain things become less important, and there are certain events became more important, and your perspective changes. But those would be some of the exercises that I would suggest. I think would be great.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Rachel, we want to be mindful because I know you do have a call at 2:30. I've got 2:20 right now. Does anybody have any comments or questions, concerns that you'd like to surface in the next 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll let Rachel go on to her 2:30 call.
I had a quick question. So I'm with the Workforce Development Board of Central Ohio, and we provide a number of resources around training and on-the-job training and kind of upskilling for employees in a variety of different ways. So I'm just curious from your experience, Rachel, and from this group, with all of the different things that we talked about, what are the skills deficits that people might be experiencing during this? And I know we talked about, presenting virtually being one of them, but I'm just curious if you had the opportunity to give someone, a half-day training, what would that focus on?
What I've found is that I think that planning your day and planning your time, sort of some of the executive planning skills, when people, especially because now that they're in this home environment, there's less structure to their day. There's less management layer there, sort of guiding and observing in the moment and helping people prioritize. So for me, I think it's pretty basic skill, but I'm sure we can all brush up on it, but just more, those executive planning skill set, day, week, month, and so on.
Thank you. That's good.
Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today and leading this really, really great informative conversation. I so appreciate it and appreciate all of you on the call taking time this afternoon. This is being recorded, so this will live out on the Chamber archives for you to go back and reflect. But Thank you, everybody, so much. Appreciate it. Stay safe and be well. And we'll talk soon.
Thanks so much. Nice
Thank
to
you,
see
Rachel.
you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great week.
You too.